The ancient library of Süleymaniye breathed history through every stone crack, through every cracked binding, through centuries of dust that danced in the rare rays of light that broke through the narrow windows. Dr. Emre Karadeniz descended into the basement along steps worn by millions of steps of scientists who searched these depths for truths that could change the world or destroy it. The air here was thick, heavy with the scent of old leather and mildew and something else, the faint scent of secrets kept in the dark for too long. Emre turned on his headlamp, and the narrow beam picked out rows of wooden boxes, each containing documents that could rewrite the history books or send your researcher to the grave. He had been working here for 8 months, cataloguing documents from the late Ottoman period for his dissertation on the political repressions of Sultan Abdülhamid II. The work was painstaking, often tedious but necessary. Every document had to be examined, described, scanned. Emre had grown accustomed to this routine, to the solitude of the dungeon, to the fact that his only companions were the ghosts of the past. But today the ghosts decided to speak. Emre pulled another stack of documents from drawer. Number 247. 18th century religious treatises, handwritten by unknown monks, a common find in the Ottoman archives. He automatically weighed the book in his hands and frowned. The weight did not match the thickness. Carefully opening the cover, Emre discovered that the middle of the book had been cut out, creating a hiding place. Inside was a leather scroll tied with a silk cord. The leather was dark with age, but well preserved. On it was a barely discernible symbol, a crescent moon with 7 stars, burned with a hot iron. Emre's hands shook as he untied the lace. Hidden places in ancient books were not uncommon, often used to hide valuable documents from raids or fires. But something about this scroll made his heart beat faster. Perhaps it was the way it was hidden. Perhaps it was the symbol on the skin. Or perhaps it was simply the instinct of a historian who sensed a great discovery was coming. The manuscript was written in Ottoman Turkish, in an elegant hand that Emre immediately recognized as the style of an educated man of the late 19th century. The first lines made him sit down on an old wooden box. The year 1306 AH, 1888 AD. I, Ahmet Effendi, physician to His Majesty the Sultan, write these lines in the hope that someday truth will triumph over lies, and justice over conspiracy. 12. Righteous men have fallen by the hand of the unrighteous. 12 lights of progress have faded into darkness, and I, the servant of truth, fear that I shall become the 13th. Emre glanced at the next page, and his blood ran cold. There was a list of names, 12 high-ranking Ottoman officials, with the dates of their deaths and details of the circumstances of their demise. Mehmet Pasha, the Minister of Education, had died of a sudden fever on November 15, 1888. Ibrahim Effendi, the port's chief translator, had died of a heart attack on February 3, 1889. All 12 deaths were officially attributed to natural causes. But Ahmet Effendi described symptoms that left no doubt: poisoning. Moreover, he indicated specific poisons: datura extract, belladonna tincture, castor oil powder. Substances that in skilled hands could imitate a stroke, a heart attack, a fever. But the worst thing was not that they were killed. The worst thing was why. All the victims were reformists. People who wanted to modernize the empire, bring it closer to European standards, give more freedom to their subjects. Their deaths stopped key reforms, threw the Ottoman Empire back decades in development. They call themselves the Shadow Keepers, wrote Ahmet Efendi. They say that they are defending the true faith from the corrupting influence of the West. But I see in their eyes not piety, but a thirst for power. They kill not in the name of Allah, but in the name of their own ambitions. As Emre read on, the picture became more and more terrifying. A secret society that had infiltrated every level of power, from the palace to the army, from religious circles to trade guilds. People who considered themselves guardians of tradition, but in reality were common murderers. Their leader hides under the name of Hakim Pasha. No one knows his real name, no one has seen his face, but his power is absolute. One word from him is enough to make any person in the empire disappear forever. Emre turned the page and saw a diagram, a plan for the ritual that the keepers of the shadow performed after each murder. A symbol was left on or near the victim's body, that same crescent with 7 stars. Each star signified one of the principles of the organization: faith, tradition, order, hierarchy, obedience, sacrifice, and secrecy. The last entry in the diary was dated October 12, 1891. They know about my notes, This morning a servant brought me a gift from an unknown benefactor, a box with 7 stars on the lid. Inside was a white powder and a note, for the one who knows too much. I take the hint. I don't have much time left. If anyone ever finds these records, know this. The Shadow Keepers did not disappear with the death of Sultan Abdul Hamid. They will exist as long as there is fear of change. Look for their symbols, look for their methods. They are repeated from century to century. At this point, the recordings ended. Emre sat in the basement of the library, holding a document that could revolutionize the understanding of Ottoman history. But his thoughts were not about his dissertation or his scientific publications. He was thinking about the news he had been reading for the past 2 years. Member of Parliament Kemal Öztürk, a vocal supporter of education reform, died of a heart attack at the age of 42. Officially, it was overwork. But Emre remembered that at the scene of his death, the police found a strange symbol scratched into the wall, a crescent with 7 stars. Journalists wrote about vandalism. The police explained it as accidental graffiti. Journalist Ayşe Kaya, who was investigating government corruption, died in a car accident. Her car crashed into a tree on an empty road, even though Ayşe was an experienced driver and had never drunk alcohol. At the scene of the accident, someone left a wreath of 7 white roses arranged in a crescent shape. Women's rights activist Leyla Demir was found dead in her apartment. An overdose of sleeping pills, police said. A suicide due to depression. But friends said Leyla was full of plans and never talked about death. And on her desk was a postcard of the night sky. 7 stars in the shape of a crescent moon, 3 deaths in 2 years, 3 people who fought for progress and reform. 3 times when symbols that Emre now recognized appeared at the death sites. The Shadow Keepers did not disappear with the fall of the Ottoman Empire. They adapted, evolved, but continued their work. Emre photographed each page of the manuscript with his phone, then carefully rolled it up and tucked it into his briefcase. He needed to study the document more closely, check the names in the archives, find confirmation. As he climbed out of the basement, he didn't notice the figure in the dark cloak watching him from around the corner of the building. He didn't see the figure take out a phone and dial a short number. He found Ahmet Efendi's manuscript. A voice whispered into the receiver. "What do you order me to do?" The answer was short. For now, watch. If he starts digging deeper, you know what to do. Emre walked through the evening Istanbul, unaware that his every step was being tracked. The city lived its usual life. Merchants were closing their shops, office workers were rushing home, tourists were taking pictures against the backdrop of mosques. But under this ordinariness, there was another reality, a world of shadows and secrets, where history repeated itself from century to century. At home, in his small apartment overlooking the Bosphorus, Emre brewed a strong cup of tea and sat down at his computer. He had a long night of research ahead of him. He needed to find all the information he could about the victims listed in the diary, trace the connections between them, understand the structure of the secret organization. He didn't know that someone in the building next door was watching his windows with binoculars. He didn't know that his phone was tapped and his computer hacked. Emre Karadeniz, a doctor of historical sciences and an expert on the Ottoman Empire, thought he was conducting scientific research. In fact, he signed his own death warrant. At midnight, the phone rang. Unknown number. Dr. Karadeniz? Yes, I'm listening. Some secrets must remain buried. This is the final warning. The connection was cut off, leaving Emre in the silence of his night apartment. He looked at the manuscript lying on the table, then at the city lights outside the window. Somewhere out there, among millions of people, the modern guardians of the shadow were hiding, and now they knew that their secret was out. The game had begun, and Emre still had to figure out who was the hunter and who was the prey. Istanbul woke up in a haze of fires. Emre stood on the banks of the Golden Horn, watching black columns of smoke rise into the sky over the Süleymaniye district. A call from the librarian woke him at 4 in the morning. The ancient library building was on fire. A coincidence? In a city where every stone is steeped in conspiracies, there are no coincidences. Ash fell on his shoulders like snow from hell as he approached the scene of the tragedy. The firemen had already put out the fire, but the basement where he had found Ahmet Efendi's manuscript was a charred cave. All the documents that could have confirmed his discovery had turned to dust. But not all. Emre patted the inside pocket of his jacket, where the flash drive with the scanned pages lay. A premonition had made him transfer all the files to the removable drive the night before. The intuition of a historian accustomed to the fact that important documents tend to disappear at the most inopportune moment. Dr. Karadeniz. He turned around. A woman of about 40 in a formal suit, with piercing brown eyes and a face on which fatigue struggled with determination. In her hand was a police badge. Commissioner Demir, Serious Crimes Department. I need to talk to you. They got into her car, and Icy drove him through the Istanbul morning, through streets where history was writing new chapters every second. Emre was silent, studying her profile. Classic Turkish features, but in her eyes, the weariness of someone who had seen too much evil. 3 years ago, I began investigating a series of strange deaths, she said, her eyes on the road. Politicians, journalists, activists, all officially died of natural causes. But there were too many coincidences, and most importantly, symbols. She handed him a folder of photographs. Emre opened it and felt his blood run cold. The crime scene photographs showed the same symbols, a crescent with 7 stars, carved into wood, laid out in stones, drawn in blood on walls. Keepers of the shadow, he whispered. What? a secret organization from the Ottoman Empire. I found documents. Emre hesitated, remembering the fire. Found and lost. Aishi parked outside an old police building in the Beyoğlu district. The interior smelled of tobacco, coffee, and something else. The smell of secrets that had seeped into the walls over decades of work. On the walls of her office hung maps of Istanbul with marked spots, photographs of victims, diagrams of connections. Emre recognized the handwriting of a real detective. Methodical, meticulous, obsessive. "Tell me about these shadow keepers," Aisha said, pouring strong Turkish coffee. Emre took out the flash drive and connected it to his computer. The pages of Ahmet Efendi's diary appeared on the screen, and he began translating the text from Ottoman Turkish 1876. The Berlin Congress forced Sultan Abdülhamid to accept a constitution that limited his power, but not everyone was ready for change. In the secret halls of the Yildiz Palace, those who saw Western reforms as a threat to the true faith gathered. Ulama who feared losing influence, military men accustomed to absolute power, merchants who profited from the corruption of the old system. Their leader was a man who hid under the name of Hakim Pasha. No one knew his real name, no one saw his face. He always wore a mask of black silk with 7 silver stars. They said that he was one of the Sultan's confidants, but who exactly remained a secret. Emre showed Aishi the organizational chart from the manuscript. A pyramidal structure where each level knew only its immediate contacts. 7 circles, according to the number of stars on the symbol, guardians of faith, guardians of traditions, defenders of order, guardians of hierarchy, guardians of submission, guardians of sacrifice, and finally the inner circle, guardians of mystery. They did not kill randomly, Emre continued. Each victim was carefully chosen, ministers who carried out reforms, journalists who criticized the Sultan, intellectuals who advocated modernization. Their deaths stopped progress, returned the empire to feudal order. Aisha studied photographs of modern victims. MP Kemal Öztürk advocated for education reform, wanted to introduce secular subjects in religious schools. Journalist Ayşe Kaya investigated government corruption. Activist Leyla Demir fought for women's rights. The same goals, the same methods, Emre agreed. The organization has adapted to the new times, but the essence remains the same. They worked until the evening, comparing historical and contemporary data. Emre translated the pages of the manuscript, and Ayşe checked the information against databases. Gradually, a picture of a criminal network that had been operating for a century and a half emerged. "Look at this." Ayşe pointed to the computer screen. DNA analysis of samples from modern crime scenes. Hair found on Kemal Öztürk's clothes. Saliva on a cigarette butt outside Ayşe Kaya's house. Skin under Leyla Demir's fingernails. She resisted. And what did the analysis show? All samples belonged to one person. Male, 35-45 years old. But the most interesting thing is that genetic markers indicate origin from a noble Ottoman family. We have a database of descendants of the old aristocracy. She opened another file. The screen displayed the genealogical tree of the Yilmaz family, one of the influential Ottoman dynasties whose roots went back to the 15th century. Selim Yilmaz, 42, history teacher at a private university, descendant of the Vizier Osman Pasha, who served under Sultan Abdülhamid. Officially a respectable citizen, an expert on Ottoman history. Unofficially our prime suspect. Emre studied the photograph of Selim Yilmaz. An intelligent face, a neat beard, the eyes of an intellectual. A man who could lecture on the empire's glorious past and kill those who threatened his ideals. Where is he now? Under surveillance. But we don't have enough evidence to make an arrest. We need more evidence. Ace closed the files and looked at Emre. Dr. Karadeniz, do you understand that you are now in danger? If Yilmaz is really a member of this organization, he knows about your discoveries. As if in response to her words, Emre's phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Hello? Dr. Karadeniz. The voice was distorted by the modulator, but there was a cold politeness in it. We know about your research. We know about Ahmet Efendi's manuscript. Who is this? People who keep the traditions. We would like to meet you. Discuss prospects for cooperation. I'm not going to cooperate with anyone. I'm afraid you have no choice. Theodosius Cistern, tomorrow at midnight. Come alone. The connection was broken. Isa looked at Emre with concern. It's a trap. Of course. But this is the only way to get to the organization. I'll go, not alone. We'll organize cover. Emre shook his head. They will notice any surveillance. These people have a century and a half of experience in concealment. But I can take a transmitter with me. Record the conversation. The next day was spent in preparation. Isa equipped Emre with a miniature recording device and a GPS tracker. They studied the plans for the cistern of Theodosius, an ancient underground reservoir from the Byzantine period that now served as a tourist attraction. In the evening, Emre received an SMS from an unknown sender. Service entrance. Security will be withdrawn. At 11:30 he approached the cistern. The tourist area was empty. The restaurants had closed. The last customers had gone home. The service door was indeed open. Emre descended the stairs into the dungeon. The cistern was impressive in its size, with endless rows of columns supporting a vaulted ceiling. In the dim light of the emergency lighting, the place looked like the set of a horror film. Welcome, Dr. Karadeniz. The voice echoed in the void. A figure in a dark, hooded cloak emerged from behind one of the columns. His face was not visible, but his gait and voice suggested a middle-aged man. Who are you? Call me the Guardian. Just like our ancestors called themselves a century and a half ago. The figure came closer, but the face was still not visible in the shadow of the hood. You have done an impressive job of studying our past. But the past is not just history. It is a living tradition that continues in the present. A tradition of murder. The tradition of defending true values from the corrupting influence of the West. Your modern reformers are no different from those liberals of the 19th century who wanted to turn the great empire into a miserable imitation of Europe. Emre activated the recording device. So, you killed Kemal Öztürk, Isa Kayu, Leyla Demir. We have protected society from their corrupting influence, just as our ancestors protected it from the reformers of the past. What about the fire in the library? A necessary measure. Some knowledge is too dangerous for public peace. Guardian slowly walked around the column, forcing Emre to turn around after him. But you, Dr. Karadeniz, are a special case. Your research, your understanding of history make you valuable. We would like to invite you to join us. Become a killer. To become a defender of traditions, a keeper of true values. Believe me, the role is much more honorable than it may seem. Emre felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. An SMS message. He glanced at the screen and went cold. The message was from an unknown number, but it contained a photograph of himself standing in a cistern next to the mysterious guardian. The picture had been taken from above, from some hidden position. Your fate was sealed from birth. Check the genealogy of the Karadeniz family, especially the period 1876-1890. Emre looked up at the guardian, who was watching him with visible pleasure. "Did you receive any interesting news, Doctor?" "How do you know?" "Because I sent it. Or more precisely, my colleague, who's watching us from the upper gallery, sent it." The guardian pulled back his hood, and Emre saw the face of Professor Osman Tezer, his supervisor, the man he trusted more than anyone else in the world. "Osman Bey." "But how? Why?" "Because it is a family tradition, dear Emre. A tradition that is passed down from generation to generation. Your great-grandfather, Mehmet Karadeniz, was one of the founders of our organization, a companion of the first Hakim Pasha. The world began to spin around Emre. Everything he believed in, everything he considered true, collapsed in an instant. This is impossible. It is entirely possible. And what's more, it is inevitable. Blood obliges, Emre. Your family has served the Shadow Keepers for a century and a half. The time has come for you to take your place in our ranks. Tezer pulled an old photograph from his pocket and handed it to Emre. The 19th century photo showed a group of men in Ottoman robes standing around a table with a crescent moon and 7 stars symbol. One of them bore a striking resemblance to Emre himself. Mehmet Karadeniz, your great-grandfather. He helped plan the murders of reformers. His notes, by the way, are kept in our archive. Much more complete than the diary of Ahmet Efendi. Emre looked at the photograph, feeling his idea of his own family crumble. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's time to make a decision. Either you join us voluntarily or, well, you've seen what happens to those who stand in our way." Tezer made a gesture with his hand, and 2 more men emerged from the shadows. Emre recognized one of them as Selim Yilmaz, the same teacher the police had suspected. "Dr. Karadeniz," Yilmaz said, "I hope you make the right decision. We don't want to lose such a talented researcher." "What if I refuse?" "Then tomorrow, the news will report the tragic death of a young historian who could not stand the pressure of work and committed suicide. Such cases, unfortunately, are not uncommon in the academic environment." Emre realized he was trapped. But he had one trump card left, a recording device and a GPS tracker. ICE knew where he was. "I need time to think." "Of course. You have until tomorrow evening. We'll meet here at midnight. And remember, we always know where you are." Tezer. And his companions disappeared into the darkness of the cistern as suddenly as they had appeared. Emre was left alone among the ancient columns, holding a photograph of his great-grandfather, the founder of the Organization of Assassins. He climbed slowly, feeling the weight of discovery. His family, his mentor, his own life, all were part of a game that had begun a century and a half ago and was not going to end. But Emre had a plan, dangerous, possibly suicidal, but the only way to stop the Shadow Keepers once and for all. Tomorrow, he will return to the tank, but not to join the organization, and to destroy it. The dawn over Istanbul was the color of dried blood. Emre stood at the window of Ice's apartment, watching the sun rise over the Bosphorus, painting the waters of the Strait crimson. Over the past 24 hours, his world had been completely turned upside down. There was not a single support left to rely on. Family, traitors, mentor, murderer, past, lie. The only choice left was between revenge and justice, and Emre was no longer sure if there was a difference between the two. "We arrested Selim Yilmaz an hour ago," Isa said, entering the room with a cup of coffee. "The recordings from the tank gave us enough grounds, but there is a problem." She turned on her tablet and showed a video of the interrogation. Yilmaz sat in the cell, calm and confident, as if the arrest was part of a plan. "Commissioner Demir, you have arrested the wrong man," he said on the tape. "I am just an enforcer, a soldier following orders. The real leader remains free." "Who is he?" "A man you would never suspect. A man who shaped the minds of a generation of historians, including Dr. Karadeniz." The recording ended. Ayşe turned off the tablet. 2 hours after this conversation, Yilmaz was found dead in his cell. He had poisoned himself with the same poison he used for the murders. Cyanide in a capsule hidden in the crown of a tooth. Emre wasn't surprised. The Shadow Keepers were always ready to die for their ideals, or for fear of being exposed. But before he died, he managed to write a note. Ayşe handed him a piece of paper. In the trembling handwriting of a dying man, it read, "Theodosius Cistern, Archive, under the altar of the 7th column." "We searched the cistern last night," Ice continued. "We found a secret room disguised as old masonry. Inside is the organization's archive for a century and a half." She opened her laptop and showed her photos of the find. Wooden boxes filled with documents, photographs, personal belongings of the victims. A macabre museum of murders that stretched across the centuries, member lists, assassination plans, financial documents. And this. A photo of a family tree appeared on the screen. A complex diagram of family connections that showed how the organization had been passed down through the generations. Emre found his family name and traced the line back to its origins. Karadeniz, Yilmaz, Tezer, Demir. Dozens of families connected by blood and oaths. "Demir," he whispered, looking at Ayşe. "My great-great-grandfather was a policeman for Sultan Abdülhamid. He helped the Shadow Guardians cover up their crimes." Ayşe's voice was firm, but there was pain in her eyes. "I only learned about this yesterday when I was studying the archives." Emre realized that they were both heirs to a past they had not chosen. Descendants of murderers and their accomplices, doomed to pay for the sins of their ancestors. "But there's more," Ice continued. "The documents show that the organization is much larger than we thought. It's an international network with cells in 20 countries. Turkey is just one of the bases." She showed a diagram of connections, lines stretching from Istanbul to Berlin, Paris, London, Moscow, Cairo. The modern Guardians of the Shadow have become a transnational corporation of death, and the leader of the entire network. According to the documents, he bears the title of the Last Hakim. He coordinates the activities of all cells, plans strategy for decades ahead. But the name is encrypted. Emre studied the diagram, trying to find clues. And then his gaze fell on one detail, the access code to the archive, written in the corner of the diagram. 7 digits. 1876324, 1876, year of the organization's foundation. 324, number of days in the Ottoman calendar year before the creation of the Shadow Guardians. Only a man with a deep knowledge of Ottoman history could have come up with such a code. a man who trained a whole generation of historians. Osman. Tezer, Emre said. My supervisor is the last Hakim. Aishi's phone rang. She answered, listened to the message and turned pale. Professor Tezer has disappeared. He was out all night. The university reported that he did not show up for lectures. Neighbors saw him carrying several boxes out of the house last night. He knows we've opened the archive. He's preparing to escape or for the final blow. As if in response to his words, Emre's phone rang. A familiar number, Professor Tezer. Hello, teacher. Good afternoon, Emre. I hope you have studied your family history well. Well enough to know that you are a murderer. I am the keeper of traditions, the defender of the values that your family has honored for a century and a half. It is a pity that you chose the path of betrayal, just like you did when Selim Yilmaz was killed. Yilmaz became the weak link. His death was necessary to preserve the organization, just as yours is necessary now. Tezer fell silent, and only the sound of the wind could be heard in the receiver. Where are you? Where it all began. Suleymaniye Mosque. Come alone if you want to know the whole truth. You have an hour. The connection was interrupted. Emre looked at Isa. It's a trap. Of course, but the only way to stop him is to meet him halfway. I'm going with you. No, Tezer knows about your family connections. If he sees you, he'll know it's a trap. I need to go alone. Emre. Commissioner, there is a list of all international cells in the archive. Use it. Contact Interpol. Arrest them all at once. But give me the opportunity to finish what my great-grandfather started. An hour later, Emre was climbing the steps of the Suleymaniye Mosque, the majestic 16th-century building, the work of the great architect Sinan, gazed silently at the Golden Horn. There were no tourists. The mosque was closed for restoration, but the main entrance was open. Inside, the darkness was dim, broken only by the faint light coming through the stained glass windows. Emre walked across the marble floor, his steps echoing under the vaults. Professor Tezer stood in the center of the prayer hall, near the mihrab. He was dressed in traditional Ottoman clothing, a long kaftan, a turban, a medallion with a crescent moon, and 7 stars hanging on his chest. In his hands was an ancient dagger with an inlaid handle. Welcome to the house of Allah, Emre. Here your great-grandfather took the oath of the Guardians of the Shadow in 1876. You plan to kill me here, if necessary. But first I want to show you something. Tezer pointed to the wall behind the mihrab. Emre walked closer and saw that names were carved into the ancient marble, hundreds of names of the Ottoman aristocracy, members of the organization for a century and a half. Your family is here, at the very top of the list. Emre found his great-great-grandfather's name and felt sick. Next to the name was the date of joining and the number of missions completed. 17 murders. You can atone for the sins of your ancestors, Emre. Become what you were meant to be. The leader of a new era of Shadow Guardians. The leader of the murderers. The leader of those who protect the world from chaos. Look at what is happening in the world. Terrorism, corruption, moral decline. Liberals and reformers are destroying the foundations of civilization. We are the last line of defense. Tezer approached, the dagger gleaming in the semi-darkness. The international network is ready for a new stage. 50 targets in 20 countries. Politicians, journalists, activists. Their simultaneous elimination will change the course of history. You are crazy. I am a seer. Like your great-great-grandfather, like all the guardians before us. We see further than ordinary people. Emre slowly retreated towards the exit, but Tezer blocked his way. "Choose, Emre. Join us or die here as a traitor to family traditions." "What if I choose the third option?" "Which?" Emre took a dictaphone out of his pocket, the same one he used to record the conversation in the tank. "The option where the whole world learns the truth about the Shadow Keepers. I am broadcasting our conversation live over the internet. Tens of thousands of people are listening to us right now." Tezer's face contorted with rage. "You wouldn't dare. You already dared. Tell the viewers about your plans to kill 50 people, about the international network, about how you poisoned Selim Yilmaz." Tezer realized he was trapped. He lunged at Emre with a dagger, but Emre managed to dodge. The duel began in the sacred walls of the mosque, a battle between the past and the future, between tradition and progress. Tezer was older and more experienced, but Emre was younger and more desperate. They struggled between the columns, the dagger narrowly missing its target several times. Finally, Emre managed to knock Tezer down and pin him to the floor. "Surrender. It's over." "It's not over," Tezer croaked. "The organization will survive. It always does." He took a small capsule from his bosom and bit into it before Emre could stop him. The cyanide worked quickly. Within seconds, Professor Osman Tezer, the last Hakim of the Shadow Keepers, was dead. Police officers led by ICE stormed the mosque. The operation to arrest the international network began simultaneously in 20 countries. By evening, more than 100 people had been arrested, but the story didn't end there. A month later, when the noise around the revelation had died down, Emre received a package with no return address. Inside was an old leather-bound book with a crescent moon and 7-star symbol on the cover. The first page contained a message written in Tezer's familiar handwriting. "Dear Emre, if you are reading this, it means that I am dead. And you think you have won. But the Shadow Keepers have existed for a century and a half, not because we are strong, but because we are patient. We know how to wait." Emre turned the page and found a complete list of all the members of the organization for 150 years, thousands of names, including those who had escaped arrest. The last page contained a modern list with addresses, phone numbers, plans, and at the very end, his own name, written in Tezer's hand. Emre Karadeniz, heir to the tradition, future leader of the Guardians of the Shadow. Under the name was a note. "Blood obliges, legacy awaits. An organization never dies, it only changes leaders." Emre closed the book and looked out the window at Istanbul at night. Somewhere in the darkness of the city, the surviving members of the organization were hiding, waiting, planning, preparing for a revival. And in his hands lay a list of all their names, a weapon for the final destruction of the Shadow Keepers, or an invitation to lead them. He walked over to the fireplace and held the book to the fire. One movement, and the secrets of a century and a half would turn to ashes. The organization would die along with its secrets, but then he'll never know who's still at large, who's still killing, who's preparing new victims. Emre put the book down and sat down at the table. He picked up a pen and opened the first page. If he wanted to destroy the Shadow Guardians once and for all, he would have to become one of them. Study their methods. Find all the remaining members, lure them into a trap. Become a monster to defeat monsters. He began to write. Diary of Emre Karadeniz, heir to the tradition of the Guardians of the Shadow. Outside the window, Istanbul slept restlessly, and the stars lit up in the sky above the Bosphorus. 7 bright dots in the shape of a crescent moon, an eternal reminder that some secrets outlive their keepers, and that sometimes, in order to save your soul, you have to sell it to the devil. Emre wrote until dawn, planning the hunt for those who had once been his allies. The heir to a tradition of assassins became their executioner. The circle was closing. History was repeating itself. The Shadowkeepers had a new leader, only he wasn't hunting reformers. He hunted the Guardians themselves.